Todd, how are you?
Doing great, Rob.
All the way down in North Austin. Todd, how are you?
Doing great, Rob. There we go. All right. Well, hey, gang. It's your old pal from the internet, Todd B, and we're here with the Run Zero Hour. Welcome, one and all. I'm here with my good pal, Rob King, Director of Security Research. I'm Todd Beardsley, Vice President of Security Research. But I'm not Rob's boss. Rob's my boss today because we're going to be talking to Rob a lot about all the new fancy that's available right now for runZero customers. If you're on the runZero console, you probably have seen this in the last week or two.
Hmm.
But we're gonna dive into like all the cool stuff that's going on here. But first, next slide, please.
You just said you're not the boss of me, and you're telling me to go to the next slide?
Yeah, please.
Oh, well, since you said please.
First, we're going to talk about the state of vulnerability management. And the name of the game here is, next slide, please. I cannot hold all these CVEs. And oh, wait, I almost forgot. I do have a cowboy hat as shown in my in my avatar for this, so I'm gonna put that on real quick. I'm just gonna model that. I know that the zoom filters kind of eat the sides of it, but there, gaze upon it. It's wonderful. It's the first cowboy hat I've ever owned. I just bought this like 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I've lived in Texas for like 25 years. I've never had a cowboy hat. But anyway, state of vulnerability management and the CVE situation.
Hmm.
So beep, 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 breaking news. Emphasis on break. Uh, the if you pay any attention at all to InfoSec gossip or tech news in any capacity, you probably have heard that there was a little bit of a hiccup with the whole CVE thing. I'm here to tell you everything's fine, nothing to see here. And I can say that because I'm wearing a CVE shirt. And that is because I'm on the CVE board. And so I just wanted to like lay it down real quick of what's going on. There was a very brief interruption, planned interruption in funding, because as you may know, DHS, which is part of the US government, is the sole funder of the CVE program and all the bells and whistles that come with that. So things like the website and generating numbers and onboarding CNAs and all that other stuff, right? For CVE, that is all paid for by DHS. That contract to MITRE, which does a lot of the work there, um, failed to get updated in time. We'll say it that way. It wasn't canceled, but there's like a recurring contract that happens every year. I also used to work in the government, but this paying for stuff like is kind of alien to me, so I'm going to stumble through a little bit. But anyway, there was a big worry that today, CVE, today being April 16th, 2025, CVE would cease to be. There was a lot of that, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'm here to tell you right now, the CVE did not cease to be. A couple things happened, though. One, CISA specifically, which is a part of DHS, stepped up and exercised an option in the contract that allows for funding for the next 11 months. So we're in no immediate danger, which is great. And also, some folks on the board, myself included, have been advocating for a more distributed funding model for CVE through the CVE Foundation. And so I've said the word CVE like 9 million times in the last 5 minutes. But what does this have to do with runZero and all our stuff that we were here to talk about normally? Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of CVEs out there. There's thousands. thousands and thousands and thousands of them, right?
Hmm.
And the amount of traffic that you get from CVE, while important and is kind of a cornerstone of cybersecurity today, the cybersecurity ecosystem, it is not the only thing, right? It is not the only thing that network operators, network administrators, defenders, security groups, all of that, it's not the only thing that they have to worry about. And so what a lot of people's pain points today in the world of vulnerability management is around this like just torrent of CVEs, right? And do I have to worry about this one? Do I have to worry about this one? You get to ask that question like 200 or 300 times a day now. Uh, and that's terrible. That's a terrible state to be in. And also, most CVEs skew high, right? Like if I've got, let's say I'm a researcher or I'm a product developer or something, and I've got kind of like a lame rinky-dink vulnerability that only shows up in weird configurations and in a part of my product that hardly anyone ever uses, maybe I'm not going to issue a CVE for it. Maybe I'm just going to fix it, right? Like, and this is normal in software development. People fix security relevant bugs all the time. Sometimes they fix bugs that they don't even realize are security relevant. They just fix them, right? And so what you end up having then is this kind of self-selecting list of vulnerabilities that will skew to like the high and critical. And there are tens of thousands of these, right? So what you end up seeing in your CVE feeds, whatever you use for that, is a lot of red, a lot of like, oh no, I have to do things right now or else I'm going to get totally owned. And we know that's not the case, right? Like the amount of exploitation that happens in the world is not nearly as high as like one might guess from the volume of CVE. So you see a lot of people will call it score inflation. It's more about just like that kind of self-selecting bias of like, well, I'm only going to report important things, right? Which you should, right?
Hmm.
You would that's very normal, right? But it makes it all very hard to focus on what actually matters, especially if your eyeballs are constantly battered by CVE numbers and descriptions and stuff. So how are we doing it different? Next slide, please. And Rob, I promise we'll get to you in just a second. I'm talking a
No,
lot.
that's fine. I did have a question though, Todd,
Yeah.
about, and maybe this is beyond the scope of the conversation, but how has the move to sort of like independent CNAs affected this
Oh, hockey stick,
inflation?
right? Like, this is the hockey stick you're looking at right now.
Yep.
In 2016, take a guess of where that was, right? On this.
Yeah.
2016, Federation started happening. Before
Okay.
2016, the MITRE Corporation was not the sole provider of CVE information, but like they covered like 80% of it at that time,
Okay.
right? You had a few others. There was this like brief dalliance in 2014 where like Microsoft and Oracle and like a couple other just giant tech companies were in the mix. And then everyone thought that was dumb. And they were like, how about we like expand it out to other software and service providers and researchers like me, and vulnerability management companies and all kinds of folks, right? And so in 2016, we saw
Hmm.
like a real huge uptick in the number of just individual authorities who could issue their own CVE numbers, right? And that was
Hmm.
great. It was wonderful. Also, it meant a lot
Even
more.
like autonomous hacker collectives could just anybody.
Even autonomous hacker collectives that Rob and I may both be members of. Yes, we are in the AHA CNA right now, and it's great. I think it's the only autonomous collective that is a CNA. We were in a race. We were in a race with the Biohacking Village, actually, and I think we hit it first. And Biohacking Village, I think, is still in there, but they haven't issued much lately. Um, but anyway, and so we see this, right? And then right around, you'll see another like tick there, like that last big tick in
Hmm.
2022, like late 2022, early 2023. That's when like the Linux kernel got involved, and they,
Hmm.
being Linux nerds, automated it. And so I would say that the Linux folks are like going against the grain. This whole stuff I just talked about of like, oh, you're only going to see like important stuff. Not so much now, especially for Linux, right? Now, does this mean that you have to like pay attention to every single Linux bug? No, no one's forcing you to do that. We live in a free society still, turns out, and you can pay attention to the vulnerability feeds you need to pay attention to. But like Linux will issue CVEs. They've gotten criticism of like, oh, it's just every bug gets a CVE now, and that's not the case. Not that I've seen. If you can find me a bug that is a Linux bug that doesn't have a Linux kernel bug that doesn't have a security implication, and that has a CVE, that is an error. That should not be a CVE, and we can go and dispute that, and that's a thing. But I haven't seen one yet. They do seem
Hmm.
to have pretty good rigor on that. They just have a lot, right? Because the
Yeah.
churn is constant there. You'll see like WordFence is another one that has just like a million billion bugs. And they cover every WordPress plugin, no matter how big or small. So, and so there's a lot of bugs there, right? Are these all like crazy important for you? No. Like I can say categorically they're not, right?
Hmm.
And I can prove it with the next slide, if you please.
Do
Um,
please.
yeah, so these are some stats. Both of this slide and the last slide, these are pulled from HD Moore's talk. Your next incident won't have a CVE number. And it's all about like how we kind of over-index on CVEs. Um, the stat is from last year, technically 2 years ago, but like you can't know in 2023 what the 2023 number is until 2024. Anyway, um, there were over 25,000 vulnerabilities disclosed and enumerated in CVE, and according to Qual, this is a Qualys number, about 2% were actively exploited, which to me also seems real high, because during this time I used to work on the SysAkev. And I would put this number at more like 0.5%, where actually for real, actively exploited with a real victim and like a non-consensual shell basically happened.
And Todd, can you give just a brief elevator pitch on what the CISA Kev is?
Sure, I pronounce it SZA. Some people pronounce it CISA. There's no right way to say it. It's a made-up word like all words. SysCav is an effort by CISA that puts together a list of actively exploited vulnerabilities out in the wild that hit like very kind of stringent criteria. Like it has to be, first off, like honeypots don't count, mere scanning doesn't count, red teaming doesn't count. Anything that's like, so it has to be real, like have a payload and a bad guy with it. And
Hmm.
non-consensual is the other thing. There are some other filters on there, like there has to be a patch, or a very easy mitigation, something for IT people to do, which is not the
Hmm.
case, right? And sometimes things get exploited before they get CVE numbers. Sometimes they get exploited day of, and it takes a week or two to get a patch, or sometimes a month or two. And so look, those kinds of things don't show up on the Kev right away. They will eventually, but they don't show up right away. And so that's
Hmm.
where that lag is. Okay, so SysAkev is always slow, and that's by design. It's supposed to be slow and accurate. The Volcheck Kev
Hmm.
is faster and a little more loosey-goosey with their definition of what exploitation means. But like what this should tell you is like you have kind of two competing messages really on this slide. One, almost no CVEs get exploited, like a trivial
Hmm.
number get exploited. Those that do tend to get exploited pretty quick.
Hmm.
And so your patch window has shrunk. It does seem.
Yeah.
On the flip side, like the your criminals and spies of the world, they straddle both sides of this kind of timing issue. Like we
Hmm.
see, like if you just watch the Kev day to day, you'll see things show up today in the year 2025 that were disclosed in 2019. And
Yep.
oftentimes that means like, oh, bad guy found a end of life device or like an unpatched service or something like that and just popped it with something old that works. It just happens,
Yep.
right? Because like hackers don't care about like, oh, I'm gonna do like a real cool hack on this one. No, nobody does this. Like unless they're like Joey from Hackers, no one, you're not doing that, right? So next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
And so all of that is to say, Rob, tell me more about the runZero style of exposure management.
Why, thank you, Todd. I believe I will. Next slide, please. No, I'm driving, so it's fine. So the goal of runZero's new exposure management, and we're going to have a live demo here in a minute. So,
We are.
enjoy. Yeah, we are, and it's going to be great. So, but enjoy
And
the
it
static
definitely
images for a minute.
works.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I always love tempting fate, right?
Uh-huh.
So the idea is that runZero is going to be your primary source for exposure and actionable information. If you have a finding in runZero, it's not, we're trying to actively avoid CVE inflation, vulnerability inflation, score inflation. If something is being exploited and your environment is impacted and there isn't a patch, that's a finding. Whether or not it has a CVE, whether or not the CVSS score is low, right? Because that's something that doesn't necessarily matter to your environment, right? Your environment is special. You are a special and unique snowflake.
And
And
again, like hackers don't look at CVEs and vulnerability risk ratings and say like, oh,
right.
well, I'm not going to bother exploiting this one. It's a low. Like, no, they're going to exploit it anyway. Like,
Exactly. Right. Right.
you know?
And so what we've got is this concept of findings and exposures. And so what you can see here on the screen, and like I said, there's going to be a live demo in a second, but it's always nice to have just some
Yeah, yeah.
screenshots to
We'll,
talk
we'll step
about.
through. We'll tell them what we're
Yeah,
going to show them, and then tell them what we showed
exactly. Right. So
them.
you think I'm coming from this way, but I'm coming from that way. No, both ways. Yes. So you can see that we're tracking findings, and you can see we got this findings overview of how many critical findings do you have, and
Mhm.
how many high, low info. What's changed over the past month or so, because that is also valid. You want to see that number going down, right? You want to see the critical risk findings going down. This +8 probably not good. You want to see -8.
Bad
So
day in this environment
exactly.
here.
And you can see also things just like exposures, like internet accessible assets. How many of your assets are actually visible on the public internet? And is that a higher number than you expect? Because it very well may be. And what's great about this whole concept is that runZero has such a I mean, everybody on this call knows how much I love to say this because it's true. runZero really has the best device discovery, fingerprinting, in-depth data collection ever. I've been doing this a long time for a lot of different places, and runZero really is the best. I'm not. That's not marketing speak. It's true, and I love it. And so what we're doing with this is taking that incredible in-depth info and shining the spotlight of findings and exposures and what we can cull out of that data. It's I love it. It's so cool. So if I can get the next slide, there we go. So we're trying to show you findings that matter. So for example, here we have an administrative service accessible without authentication. Um, and so what does that mean? Well, that's not inherently a vulnerability, right? It's not a buffer overflow. It's not a heap
Not a
overflow. It's
file
not anything like
path
that. It's
traversal. It's not all of these CWE
right.
things.
It's exactly. It's oops, I set up an administrative service that you can get to without authentication, which is a problem. Because really,
And
if you're going to
maybe
authenticate
it's a
anything,
right. Like if we're finding it, it's probably a problem, right? Uh,
exactly.
if like it is very normal. Like the first to hit on this, right, is the unauthenticated distributed Ruby service, right? Very normal
Mm-hmm.
thing to run, like in a dev environment. I'm testing some stuff, right? Like all of that. But you want those things to be like short-lived and on your like local non-routable, like not exposed to the internet network, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Or the Cisco Smart Install Service, or debug ports, right? Debug ports are important. I need to have
Yeah.
access to my debug infrastructure, but I definitely don't need you to have access to my debug infrastructure. But it's not a bug, right? It's not a CVE. Nobody's going to issue a CVE for
Right.
Android has a debugger. Did you know that? That's not a CVE, right?
Right.
So, but we want to be able to show you the things that actually have actionable information and actionable or what's the word? What's the fancy legal term? Substantive impact
Mhm.
on that. Check with your lawyer if that's a legit. I think I made that
Yeah.
term up, but it sounds
You
cool.
should probably check with your lawyer like every 5 minutes.
But sure. Uh, and so you can see that you can find these findings. So these findings are um, human curated, right? Like this isn't it's automated in the finding, right? It's automated in, we run these queries and we do this magic, but we have a human touch to make sure that these are actually meaningful things. So you can go to the top findings, which I'll show you in a minute in our live demo. But you can go to your top findings and you can see here's, an administrative service accessible without authentication. It's critical, and there's 8 of them in your environment. That's 8 too many, right? Uh, and you have an end-of-life operating system. There's 12 of those in your environment.
Right.
And then publicly exposed, administration service with authentication. So maybe you meant to have it open, right? But so that's 8 of those. And the goal is to give you, rather than have a big old web page dashboard thing with just red lights everywhere.
Right.
That is not what we want. We want to give you, first off, our lights are, a very pleasant teal color. So
Right.
there's that. But
Very calming.
yeah, it's very calming, exactly. But we also want to make it to where you as a human, with the most complicated structure in the known universe inside your head, is not having to go through and sift through these things. We've done the sifting for you.
Right.
Yes, separating the wheat from the chaff, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want to give you, when we say actionable information, we want to give you the action that you can do to remediate this. So here, for example, there's the Broadcom VMware ESXi guest escape, which I think that came out last month, right?
Yeah, and
Anyway.
there was like a chain of them, right? Like there was 2 or 3 of them where like one of them gets you like, oh, I can write to a file in the host, and the other one was like, oh, I can like read that file and like do a cool privilege escalation. So like that,
Yeah, and
I
then
want to say there were like
right.
2 together, which is another
Mm-hmm.
thing that like, by the way, CVE is kind of not great at. Like the CVEs are individual vulnerabilities, but they don't tend to like, it's very, we found in traditional vulnerability management, it's very difficult to like express these kinds of chains of issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But not
Yeah.
so in runZero. Like this is the right? This
Yeah,
is the thing.
exactly,
This is the
right.
thing you
Yeah.
care about, right? Like,
Yep.
oh,
Yep.
well, I have a guest escape issue. That's not great.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they? Like, how do I fix this
Right.
right now? Right?
Yep.
And it's not
Yeah.
tied
CV.
to like
Yeah.
a particular CVE.
Exactly. And there's the whole concept of this vulnerability isn't critical. It's just a write permit. It's just an arbitrary file write with the permissions of a local user. And then, oh, look, there's another thing that's not critical because you have to be authenticated to write to a file to do something. And so
Right.
individually they're not critical, but
Yeah.
together, of course,
I will say that
dog.
like Wiz does, I don't know, lately, I know early on, like Wiz did a really good job of like putting together these like attack chains
Mm,
and expressing them like in like a CVSS language, which is like very comfortable to security people. It's like, oh
mm,
yeah,
mm,
these things are like, oh, that's like a 3.2 and a 3.2, but when you combine them, it's a 9.8, right? They were
right.
very good. And so I think we're doing something similar here where like we are
Mm.
servicing the thing that matters.
And sorry, and going back because I don't think I ever actually
Yeah.
said the whole remediation part,
Oh, right.
but this tells you what you need to do to fix your problem,
Mhm.
which is good. And also, and it's worth noting that this data is updated. These findings are updated in your environment. Every time your environment is updated, every time you do a rescan, periodically, this will
Mhm.
be updated. And so you can actually see those. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to go and click, oh, I've remediated this, right? Like the runZero scanner will say, oh, I noticed that this vulnerability was here and now it's not. And now this
Right.
finding is happy, right? So good for us.
Which is such a crazy innovation, right? Like,
I,
how is this
you
not the
would think,
normal
right?
way to do things? But okay.
Yes. And so again, going back to findings, we're not just talking about vulnerabilities. We're also talking about things that are actionable in your environment that you should probably fix.
Yeah.
For example, here we've got this category of best practice, service misconfigurations, obsolete or insecure protocols, insecure authentication mechanisms. None of these things are inherently
Yeah.
vulnerabilities, right? They're just things that you should probably fix. Time marches inexorably forward,
Mhm.
always twirling, twirling, twirling
Yes.
towards freedom.
Uh-huh.
And so you have protocols that become obsolete or best practices change or things like that. And so we want to give you, oh, by the way, did you notice that you're running, for example, SMB v1, which has been deprecated? And remind me later when we get a little bit more in
Yeah.
depth on that. I've got a funny story about SMBV1, but because who doesn't, right? It's an inherently funny topic. Uh,
A hilarious protocol.
it's no, it's well, it yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So, oh, and then also, so other things that aren't vulnerabilities aren't even necessarily best practices is the concept of regulatory compliance.
Right.
So, the United States, in its National Defense Authorization Act of 2019, Section 889, basically gave a list of devices that are prohibited in. And Todd, you can speak probably. Uh,
Little, yeah.
yeah, they're what's
I
the?
mean, yeah.
It's they're not allowed in certain environments, and
So Section 889 was a bit of legislation in 2019 that said, hey, we probably shouldn't have like Huawei doing all our switching and our core national security
mhm,
relevant
mhm.
networks. And so it's essentially a ban, right, for federal
Mhm.
networks to be running things like Huawei, Hikvision, or HIK. I don't even know how you're supposed to pronounce it.
I think it's supposed to be high K
High
vision.
K vision. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's supposed to be
Um,
high K vision, but I've
okay.
always read it as Hick
I
vision.
just
So I
hang on. It's hit vision.
there you go. But
So
so
no, it's so you're not supposed to run these things. All of them there, and there's only like 8 named companies and also
mhm,
all their subsidiaries, all of Chinese
right.
manufacturer, I want to say. I don't think there's any Russian stuff in there or like Armenian tech or anything like that. But
There's
I
a
think it's
regulation that
all
touches on Kaspersky. I know that,
yeah,
but
conspiracy is a
yeah,
different thing, but yeah, but it's very
right.
similar. So like
Yeah,
all
it
of this
falls
just
under this
says,
regulatory, yeah,
and that's the thing
umbrella.
too, is like um, an outfit like ZTE or High-K Vision often end up being white labeled as something else.
Hmm.
You didn't know you were running that. And
And
so
yeah,
and we're pretty good at peeking under the white label and seeing what's going
it
on.
really is. Yeah, that there's a whole thing that runZero does. And again, I'm not. This isn't marketing speak. It really is the truth. I've looked at a lot. I've worked at places that tried to do this, and I now work at a place that actually does this. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And even if you're not federal
We
government, right? Like it's very similar to the cab, right? This is a
yeah
cab. The only people who actually have to follow the cab is the U.S. federal civilian executive branch government agencies. That's it.
yeah
By binding operational directives. Nobody has to follow the Section 889 unless you're federal government, and even then, like only in most cases, right?
yeah
But it's still kind of a good idea to keep an eye on it, especially if you're like a FedRAMP outfit and you care about
yep.
that. And then there are equivalents. There are a couple states. I want to say just a couple states. I know New York is one of them. Has almost equivalent
Yeah. I think
prohibition there. So
yeah.
like if you're in New York, you can use the Section 889 finding
Hmm.
with great success.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure New York, New Jersey, maybe all the news. I don't know, New Mexico. I don't know, but
Yeah,
definitely New
yeah.
York and New Jersey both
New
lean
Dakota,
on that.
New Carolina.
New Dakota. Yep, exactly. Um, and so the but so what's interesting about this, and Todd kind of touched on it, is we really are great at finding these devices that aren't what you think they are. Like there's a lot of cameras, for example, just and I'm thinking camera just because the high K vision or Hick vision or
Yep.
I don't even know the that thing um, that aren't labeled as that, but we can still tell you, oh no, this is actually, in fact, do pay attention to the man behind the curtain, because it is in fact someone who's not supposed to be here. So I think that that's a really, really fascinating and useful thing. And I will tell you a funny story about that when we get to our live demo. So everybody, the product works great, but of course, live demos always have a way of doing
It's
their thing. So
it's
let's
it's
see.
that ding dang environment, Rob.
Yep. So, as you can see here, nothing unusual about the runZero dashboard. It is your normal dashboard, but behold, I can select a different dashboard. I can now select, and it's actually preferred if I just loaded this directly, I would have come up with this, but I wanted to give the dramatic reveal, so I flipped back to the old one.
Yeah, of course.
But
Prestige, we call that in the biz.
yes, exactly, it's the prestige. But behold, here is the
Very
new
nice.
dashboard. and it is beautiful, and I mean that in like both an aesthetic sense and also it really is just elegant and great. And I'm a Pod's known me for a long, long time, and he knows that I am a super nerd. So I really do enjoy elegant abstractions and code, and this is a really elegant abstraction and code, and it's really, really nice. And I really like it. So anyway, this is the new risk management dashboard, which everyone has access to. So definitely,
Right.
please click
Definitely
on it. And
underline that too, right? Like you have this today. If you're a RunZero customer, you have this
yep,
today. Like
you
there's
have this
nothing,
right now. And in
there's nothing
fact, and also
extra.
just
It's
in
not
case
like
you've
an
never,
add-on or anything like that.
it's not an add-on. It's not a. It is the cool. It is the new hotness.
Hmm.
And you can see this preferred dashboard here. I want to show you. You can, if you want, go over here and say set as my preferred dashboard. So
Right.
you can set that as the preferred dashboard for yourself. Um, so let's go over a little bit of what this is. So this has all sorts, your standard dashboard widgets. Um, and so the latest rapid response. So the rapid response procedure program is, every month we have our rapid response roundup. We're going to have a brief one at the end of this webcast as well. But the rapid response roundup is runZero keeps, our finger on the pulse of the vulnerability landscape. And that sounds so dramatic and dynamic, but it really is a lot of fun. And anytime a new vulnerability is disclosed that's under active exploitation or is, a threat or a resurgent vulnerability, like Todd, you were mentioning earlier, they had stuff popping up on the Kev from like 1999, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now
now I've got
we've
the.
never had anything on from 1999 on the Kev. We've
Oh,
had stuff
really?
from
Oh,
2019.
oh, 2019. Okay. Well, I mean, when you get to be my age, Todd,
Uh,
2019 and 1999 are
they're
essentially the
basically the
same year.
same distance away. Yeah.
It's really, yeah, 10 years ago was
I want to
1999.
say the
Yeah.
oldest CVE on the Kev is from, I want to say 2006. And I want to say on
Okay. I
some,
mean, that's pretty
yeah,
old. That's pretty
yeah.
old. So anyway, so if an old one rears its head or whatever, the point is if it's something that you should rapidly respond to, we issue a rapid response. And the rapid response includes things like a blog post and queries that can find these devices in your network. So we actually just issued one yesterday. So this is brand
Yeah.
new. The
Yeah.
Lantronix export authentication bypass, which is super fun. And you can see that thankfully in this particular environment, there are zero potentially impacted, which is nice. But you can click on this little widget here and you can see that you can view all of the rapid response queries. And so here are all of and actually I can
Yeah.
drop it out so you can see all of them, so you can see them all on one page. Here's all the rapid responses. So these are all things that you should, if anything shows up in your environment, you should probably take a look at it. It's
Yeah.
probably worth, you
Well, and
know,
this is
uh,
so the rapid response view here is like this is I mean, the way we talked about this yesterday when we were going through this. It's like, oh, the rapid response view, that is the like time saved in meetings view, because
yes, yes,
anything on the rapid response, almost all of them, I'm gonna go ahead and say all of them, were in the news, right? And so
right.
your boss knows about it, and you're gonna get
Mm-hmm.
called in, and maybe not called in. We don't live in 1957. But you're gonna get the sudden Slack huddle and
Yes,
say,
exactly.
and then you
Yeah,
say, "Hey, Rob, you heard about that thing?" And because you're a runZero customer, you can say, "Why, yes, boss, I did. It's in fact at the top of
exactly.
my list, and I've already remediated like a quarter of it right now, and I'll have the rest of them done by
Yep.
the end of the day." Like that's the thing. It's like, "Oh, cool. Glad you're on it. Click. Bye.
Yep.
Gonna go back to
Yep.
the golf course and my martinis, I guess, because that's what bosses do."
Uh, Yeah, speaking of 1999, I actually did get an urgent. My boss came in and urgently asked if we were using enough Java at our company, and I was like, "I yes, we're using exactly the amount of Java we need to use." I mean, Java was for the younger
All
people in the
fits.
audience. Java is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but Java was a big deal
Mhm.
in 1990. So anyway, but yes, so the rapid response widget is there for you to see what is actually really something you should look at
Yeah.
right
And
now
it's a blend,
rapidly.
right? It's like and we don't just like kind of blindly take things from the news, obviously. Like
Yes.
we do some very bespoke human homegrown analysis on all this stuff, right? To make sure
Mm-hmm.
that it's not just like hypey hype. So if
Right.
it's
Right.
not on it, like there's a little it's funny because like we are trying to figure out how to do that, right? How to say the negative. I don't know how to do
Mhm.
that in the product, right? And it's probably not the great place for the product, but we'll probably end up having just like insight blogs. So check our blog
Right.
because we might talk about a vulnerability that is getting a ton of hype that isn't kind of a
Mhm.
big deal, right? And that's going to be under the insight section, not under the rapid
Exactly.
response section.
And that kind of ties in too with the score inflation and all that. There's a lot of vulnerabilities. There was one last month that we I can't remember which one it was, but we explicitly decided not to do a rapid response for it because while it sounded super scary, it wasn't actually getting exploited.
Right.
There was no actual active exploitation.
Right.
So that's the goal here is that we want to, yeah, I spend a huge amount of energy in my life to avoid making or hearing noise. Why I have two children, I don't know, because that's like the exact
That was a
opposite of, yeah.
rookie mistake.
Yes, but in general, I want to not have a lot of noise. I want to have stuff that is actually relevant to what I'm going for. So the rapid responses are rapid, actionable, interesting, and also vetted by a human, which I think is nice. That human touch.
Yeah.
And then you can see the what's changed. So you can actually see how things are going in your network. And it's good that everything here is a negative number, right? Because we want these findings
Yeah.
to go down into
Good
the right. We
job,
want
fake
things to be
company.
less risky. Yes, exactly.
So
Well, no,
yeah,
this is
if you pop into this dashboard first thing in the morning, you got your coffee, you look at it, and then you see like, oh hey, turns out plus 5,000. What?
yeah, yeah,
Like
probably a problem.
who bridged my
Yeah,
network?
exactly. And no, this isn't a fake. This is RZ Corporation, the hottest band of like 1987, right?
Right,
So like,
yeah.
uh, when was Thievery Corporation? That was actually 90s, I think. Anyway, again, where I'm very old, Todd. Uh, so then you can see that we break down these findings by their criticality and their instances. And so let's talk a little bit actually about the difference between an instance and a finding. So you can see here, and I'm highlighting the administrative service accessible without authentication. Um,
Mhm.
that is a finding. That is something that you should care about. You should care about administrative services being accessible without authentication. Well, how many of those are in my environment? Well, there's 102 of them. So let's go look at these 102. And you can see here we've got,
You've
there's an
got some Ruby
unauthenticated
guy just
distributed
like
Ruby
going
service.
bananas.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to note that there isn't there isn't a finding for unauthenticated distributed Ruby service, right? That's something interesting about your network. The finding is that there's an administrative service accessible without authentication, and this is
So this
one of
is
them.
like a really handy grouping for the like this kind of it,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And you can see here that this has a remediation to explain how to do it and what you should look at and all that. And you've got you can click on any of these to see further details like the Cisco Smart Install service allows an unauthenticated attacker to retrieve and modify the running configuration of a network device. And what should
So
I do
smart.
about it? Yes, I should in fact disable the Cisco Smart Install service using the no vstat command in privileged exec mode. Which, by the way, the attacker is going to have privileged exec mode if you don't do this.
Right.
So you should probably do it. And it's interesting because you can see that this does not have a CVE, right? This isn't a vulnerability. The Cisco Smart Install service exists for a reason,
As
but you should
designed.
probably, yeah, it's working as designed, but you probably shouldn't have it enabled where, anybody can get to it, right?
Yeah.
And then you can, of course, click on the actual machine that it's running on, and you can see all the, here's the findings for this specific machine or the specific asset. And you can see there's even more finding, right? There's the administrative
Right.
service, accessible without authentication, which is what we just talked about. But there's service misconfigurations. It's got an expired certificate. It's got an obsolete or insecure protocol. Like, it's just a mess, right? It's just a mess.
Mhm.
So let's go back and look at, you can also see that we've broken down all the findings by risk. You can see, and these graphs are just beautiful. I called them a
That's fine.
tequila sunrise. It looks like a tequila sunrise,
It
right?
does. It does. It looks
It
delicious.
really does. It's very pretty. And it's delicious. Exactly. Um, And there's a question from the chat. Is it possible to generate email alerts for those rapid response findings? You can configure rules for doing alerts on queries. So yes, and then I would like to, in the mysterious future, have that be even more automated. But yes. Uh, and there's something, yeah, there was something about the, what was it? There was something, Cisco had a vulnerability that had a CVE, but it wasn't really a CVE, and I don't remember. Anyway, that's a whole complicated thing. Um, but yes. And then you can see, oh, and then also going back, yes, your internet accessible assets. You can see how many are accessible, which is, a whole thing. Because if you don't expect to see 250 internet accessible assets,
Right.
you should probably take a look at
Right.
that.
So like, for example, right, like you're running like you've got like a physical location, right? Because
Mhm.
it's 2018 and people still have physical locations. It's fine.
They
Uh,
do.
and so you have a physical location. You might be running like a DNS server or a mail exchange, a
Mhm.
web server or some other web server, a couple of routers, right, out there. So you might be thinking to yourself like, oh, it's normal to have five, and then you run zero for the first time.
Mhm.
And you're like, oh, I was off by a couple orders of magnitude of what's
Right,
actually.
exactly. Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's always a blast.
We had, I think this even was mentioned during a runZero hour a couple of months ago, but this is like a legitimate thing. A colleague of mine, found that they had an old cable modem at their
Mm.
house that they had stopped paying for it, but the cable company had just simply not decommissioned it or whatever. And the point is, a lot of stuff was internet accessible that shouldn't have been.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was also an issue at a local government agency here in Texas, not local, statewide government agency here in Texas, where a network engineer had brought a small router for testing purposes. Which, sure, okay, you're a network engineer, you got to test stuff, but they had basically created a bridge to the outside, and their entire uh, stuff. Which is anyway, so yeah, which that's another thing where um,
Mm.
the network bridge report in runZero is also a fascinating thing. If
Oh
we have
yeah.
time, I'll go over that here in a minute, because that's super cool. Anyway, so yes, and then so you can see you've got your top findings here. You can see at a glance what is your most critical set of findings by sorting by risk, and you can see that the administrative service accessible without authentication, which we talked about, was a whole thing. And then end of life operating system, which kind of high. You should probably deal with that.
Yeah.
Publicly exposed administrative service. This is interesting in that sometimes you mean to do that, right? Like sometimes you have a publicly exposed thing, right? So here's a publicly exposed SSH server with password authentication.
Right.
People expose SSH to the internet. I'm telling you, I'm begging you with tears in my eyes, please don't expose it to the public internet with password authentication. Like, please turn off
So
password
you're
authentication.
advocating just no auth
I just
SSH.
know off. Yeah, no. See, the attackers won't expect it, right? So
Right.
yeah.
It'll bang up all of their scripting. No,
um,
the
or
real
if you're going to
answer,
do
of
it, put
course,
commas in
is
your passwords
not.
to break the CSV. Yeah,
We're not saying please expose all your SSH with no
yeah,
auth.
no, yeah, no, no, no. That was clear.
Expose
Yeah,
your
that was a joke.
SSH with like a normal, which today is fairly normal, of just like the PKI version
Yeah,
of authentication, where you give
yeah,
a certificate and it does the thing and it does
yeah.
PKI magic.
Right. But the point is, this is an internet exposure, but you're not going to ever get a CVE for SSH with password authentication. Again, working as
Right.
designed, but something you should take care of. And so going back here, you can see there was another one I wanted to talk about. Oh, this one's a little interesting. So here's a remote code execution vulnerability. That sounds really scary, right? So why is it only rated a medium? Well, it's the way the findings work is this risk score is going to be the highest of the risk score of all the instances, right? So the max, basically the max function. Um, and and so this vulnerability was examined and analyzed, and it's fairly old. It's generally been patched everywhere that it matters, and it's not actually the remote code execution for this particular vulnerability was never actually proven to be possible. So it's kind of one of those things where okay, it's going to be rated a medium because it's years old. It's not proven to be So we want to make sure that again we're minimizing the amount of noise that
Right.
you as a person have to deal with.
And that's a good case
Um,
too, like where
yeah,
we spend a lot of time, you know, um, I want to choose a non-swear here. Dunking on CVEs
Mhm.
as
Look,
like
I
their
love CVs. I don't want
the
anybody
way
to,
to
yeah,
go. But like in that case,
yeah,
right? Yeah, that CV is legit. The actual exploitation on that is like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
but it's
Yeah,
still like good enough to warrant a medium, once you've
right.
hit
Well,
that
and we
right.
also see in a lot of products, we see your dashboard goes completely red because you're running there's this concept again of score inflation, and everybody wants to get a CVE to their name, right? And you should. I encourage anybody interested in getting into infosec. You should absolutely try to find vulnerabilities and exploits. You should absolutely get a CVE. It's super cool. Not trying to discourage anyone there, but so many of these products are by the numbers, right? So you'll get a alert saying, "Oh, this is a problem," and the issue is that you're running curl, and if you've got this version of curl installed on your system and you expose it to an attacker who can pass arbitrary command line arguments to curl, they can get remote code execution. It's like, well, are you really doing that though? And if so, you should probably ask yourself why. But anyway, and the guy who wrote curl, or the main person, Daniel Stanberg. Anyway, he has a
Yeah.
whole essay about how irritated he is that people keep reporting these critical vulnerabilities in curl that are basically impossible to ever actually exploit. Or
Mhm.
if you can exploit them, you can already execute remote code on the system anyway. So like,
Yeah. You're not breaking a security rule.
exactly right. So we want to avoid that. And we also want to avoid noise like, it's Microsoft Patch Tuesday. You should update Windows. Like that's
Yeah.
you already know that, right? We're not
Great
trying to tell
advice
you every
every
single thing.
month for the
Yeah,
last 20 years.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then also, again, just some interesting things like, insecure authentication mechanism, which I always like. So here's an authenticated web service without encryption, which I think is kind of uh, an interesting thing in that anybody in your local environment can theoretically sniff the auth on these things, which is kind of fun, right? So you should probably enable SSL on this sort
Mhm,
of thing.
mhm, mhm.
Anyway, so again, you're never going to get a vulnerability for it or a CVE for it. And it's not even technically a vulnerability. It's just something that you should be aware of that is actionable and meaningful in your environment. And I'm hammering that home because runZero is that is our goal. That is what we are. We want to be the one-stop shop for actionable exposure management. And I think we are. It's pretty cool. I don't know. I love it. I love writing code. I love writing these fingerprints. I love writing these queries. It's so great. I love it. It's just so cool. Anyway, and then so just as a not to harp on it too long because I know we've got some other stuff we need to get to, but you can see here that we've broken down all of the findings by category. So if you're
Right.
interested in internet exposure findings and all that, and you can keep track of this over time, right? So you can see that things are in fact going down. Like end of
And
life
this dashboard
findings by
goes on for days. And I know that like this is all about like all the new hotness and everything, but
Mhm.
like you've always had the capability of like just building your own dashboard, just like coming
Right,
out with
right,
things that you want. And so you can have like your Monday morning coffee dashboard and your Tuesday morning coffee dashboard or whatever, right? Like you do it that way
yeah,
if you're a weirdo. But then
right,
you can have your more holistic views as, in either as a default or something that's very close to a default view
yeah,
from the runZero console. It's
yeah.
pretty it's pretty dope. Like we're not, as mentioned in the chat, we're not your real dad. Uh, we don't get to tell you like what's important for you.
Right, right. But really, you
So,
should listen to us. So
but
yeah,
also you should listen
exactly.
to us because like,
Yeah,
we pay the
yeah.
bills.
Well, I mean, I have a teenager, and I have been informed that I don't know how anything works at all,
Oh, nice.
which is true, but he doesn't need to know that, right?
Right.
So, uh, anyway, so yes, this is. I'm going to flip back to my slides now, so you can see. You can see the slides. So the live demo, yes, that it was great,
That
and I
was a
knew it was
live
going to go off
demo.
without a hitch, obviously, because
Hey,
it's me.
Rob.
But
We
mm-hmm,
had we had a we actually had a real question in the chat. Um,
mm-hmm.
and that is it possible to generate email alerts for those rapid response findings? And I will
Yes.
say, okay, you're gonna go with a yes.
Well,
Hmm.
yeah. So I kind of mentioned so you can set up rules to run queries
Yeah.
after scans and then send the emails.
Okay.
So yes, there is the rule functionality, and I'll find the link to the
Okay.
the
Okay,
thing, and I'll put
cool.
it in the chatter. But
I mean,
yes,
I was thinking
you
like
can
the way to do it is, you can just like watch our blog, right? Because that's where it feeds
well, you can
from.
also do that. Sure.
And you watch the blog,
Um,
and you can watch the blog via RSS, and you can do your
mhm.
ifs and then that's all on your RSS. It's not going to be very specific to your environment, obviously, but like
Right.
that would be a way to like
Hmm.
really want to get paged on a Friday afternoon. Like that's how you would do it.
And so before we move on to, because we got about 10 minutes left, which is just enough time for the rapid response roundup,
Yeah.
definitely go. Give it a shot.
Give it a
It
shot.
is, yeah, it is already, if you're a runZero customer,
It turns out,
it's
Rob,
already
there
there.
is a try, not just a do.
How long have you been sitting on that one, Todd?
I
You've been waiting, haven't you?
literally just popped in my head because I'm a
Really?
complete
Okay.
genius.
All right. So, but yes, and then also, go try the free trial. Runzero.com/try. It's free and it's
Is
great. You get full
is the free?
functionality for
Okay.
yeah
Man,
for
you just rolled out over my question. Is it? I was going
oh
to
I'm
ask you,
sorry, please.
is it total? Is it totally crippled where? Like, is it?
No, it
Okay.
is it is completely so you get full functionality for a period of time and then it reverts to and then it goes to the community edition, which does have some features
Which is still
removed and
pretty
then maximum
fun.
asset limit and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is no, it is great. And even if you're I recommend downloading it and scanning your house. Not it's
Hmm.
A, you find interesting stuff, and B, it's fun. Like it's really kind
It
of
is pretty
neat to
fun.
see. It really is. Like you can see, oh, I got, in my printers or whatever, I found anytime my kids bring people over, I'm like, what kind of phone do these kids have?
Yeah,
Scan.
because
And I'm
I'm a
just like,
creep.
hey, well, okay, well, when you say it like that,
No, and well,
and I
my
have it.
favorite part, let me tell you, Rob, my favorite
Mm,
part of the community edition, which I do run in my house, and I have several children here all the time, because my teenagers are like weirdly extroverted. Is that when I find something that I don't recognize, like the procedure for like telling, runZero HQ of like, hey, there's this thing. I know what it is. Here's the fingerprint. Like that is like, I want to say it's like a 4-click procedure, right? Of
yes, yes,
submitting an unknown fingerprint with some notes of like, this is what it actually is. If you
yeah.
guys like run out of cool things to fingerprint, feel free to fingerprint this thing. It's not
Yes,
really like
and
that, but
those come to me,
Mhm.
and I or my team, and I mean it when I say it. I love fingerprinting devices. Like people at work, my
Yeah.
friends, they'll be like, "Rob, I found this old weird industrial printer. Do you want to fingerprint it?" And I'm just like, "Yes, I mean, sure, yes, actually, I would like to. Yes, I'll
Now, I
swing
did
by."
make the mistake when I was at VolnCon last week. I did make the mistake of running the Explorer in a very authoritarian, I want to say, network
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
immediately locked me out. It's like, no, 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 you don't get to ARP anything, my dude. Like, oh, dang. So, I don't think it's a
Or
bug.
like
I don't think
ARP.
it's like a product bug or anything. I think it was just this network was just like completely, but they
Yeah,
also
no,
did
I mean
banana
it's
stuff like blocked all out, like all VPN access anywhere. Like you weren't allowed to SSH out. You weren't allowed to like do normal VPN stuff. You weren't allowed to do
yeah.
like normal, like corporate Cisco VPN stuff. It was a very weirdly controlled network. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, there's always the weird stuff where you can like do, a tunnel VPN over DNS and all that. But
that's the
yes,
thing,
yeah,
right? If I really need to get out, it's not
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
stop
yeah.
me. But
So, but okay, we've got just a few minutes left, and I know that we've got some interesting rapid responses to round up.
we have
So,
mildly interesting rapid responses. They're fine.
mildly interesting.
They're
Well,
great.
there's the Crush FTP InfoSec drama, so I
Oh
do want
God,
to hear
yes.
about that. Yeah,
Hey,
there's some drama.
yeah, you know what? That fell completely. I'm holding my face because that fell completely out of my head when it got popped off the stack in favor of the CVE general drama.
Right? Yes,
Um,
but now it's back. Yes.
but now, thank you. I shouldn't have written these slides yesterday. Uh,
So
but yeah, so
we
the
have
Crush
the Crush
FTP
FTP.
thing is a thing. There was a bug. We've actually updated the blog post. Even this screenshot is from yesterday, not from today. But there was a Crush FTP bug. Crush FTP disclosed it on their blog, and they said CVE ID coming soon, and that was days. And then we in like the research CVE numbering authority community, of which there is one, we said like, hey, is anything happening with this? Should we just assign? Yes. And so Volchek, actually, friend of the show, Volchek, went out and did the thing. They're like, okay, cool, boop, 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 did it, right? Everything was fine, everything was cool. And then a week later, MITRE rolled in and said, actually, you did it wrong, and here's the real one. And so it was
Hmm.
like, I'm really boiling it down. And the thrust of it is that it was baffling on both sides, and like, and I'm kind of playing
Hmm.
both sides here because I'm also on the CVE board, but also I hang out with the research CNAs a lot. And so like the research CNAs were all like, me included, was like, why did you do it this way? Like, why did you revoke the CVE and then give another one? As you can see here, there's now two CVE numbers for this thing, which is an unusual case.
Things are
Why
getting
did
out of hand. Now there are
things
two
are
of them.
getting out of hand, right? And so it was baffling to the research CNAs why that happened. And it was baffling to MITRE, like why the research CNAs did anything at all, because they had it. Like it was in their
Hmm.
queue. They were like working it. And like, why did you like just zip in here and do this? Like that's not your job. And so, and so like that was the impasse we were at. We had a quick we had a call scheduled yesterday with some MITRE folks, but you know they were a little busy. So we postponed that call. We're gonna have it next week. It'll be great. But we're gonna figure it out, right? And so, like,
Yes.
ideally, this situation doesn't happen again for a while. Duplicates do happen from time to time, especially as you
Hmm.
might remember from 50 minutes ago when we were talking about the explosion of CNAs. Like,
Yep.
we expect duplicates and like overlapping scopes to happen. It'll probably happen more as time goes on, but we should be able to like handle that, right? And not
Yep.
screw up everybody's traditional vulnerability management. Doesn't matter for you folks. You're all cool runZero customers. You don't care about any of this.
Although for the record, we do track both CVEs for
And
the
we track,
vulnerability.
well,
Yeah.
yes. And so you're not supposed to track the 2025, the 2825 is the old one. We still reference
Hmm.
it because that's how people, because there's hundreds of articles written on it, right? So it's like we can't
Yeah.
pretend it never happened.
Hmm.
But if you go to that on the CVE website, it'll say, hey, don't use this, use that, right? And
Yeah.
that's it. So hopefully all you folks who are using vulnerability management, especially as like, an import to runZero, like those guys all have to deal with that, right? They have to deal with the renumbering. Anyway, it's a
Yep.
whole boring inside baseball thing. But
Drama.
we're
Yes.
we're dealing. This is but in the last 24 hours, this became a very second tier drama. So
Hmm. Man, it was
next
top tier
up,
drama, and then it wasn't.
I know, right? Next, it's weird. Time marches on. Rapid
Mm.
response roundup on this Dell EMC issue. I wanted to call this one out because in the long, long ago, I used to work at Dell, and specifically, I used to work on Dell EMC stuff. And
Mm.
I'm here to tell you right now, um, updating. So like a lot of times we will talk about it's like for the Windows thing, right? Like you talked about, like Microsoft Patch Tuesday, don't care, right? Like yeah, patch your stuff, patch your stuff. In this case, merely patching Dell EMC is kind of its own project. Like you
Hmm.
have to
Hmm.
like coordinate this with your change control review board because like it's a whole like takedown and patch and then bring back up. Like imagine, like and it's not that it's rickety, it's just complicated, you know?
Right. Right.
And so like it's like nah, I'm not even gonna go there. But it is complicated to just patch Dell EMC. So this is part of the reason why this made the rapid response roundup. It's like, hey, alert, alert, you're gonna have to deal with this.
Hmm.
Most of the time, obviously, this is like any kind of imagine like a consumer grade like NAS, right? Don't put the thing on the
Hmm.
internet. But people do put this on internets and like in weird bridges and like where they're
Yeah.
like sharing data with like multiple, subsidiaries and stuff like that. So like these things do tend to like straddle a lot of internal lines. And so this is something to watch out for and
Yeah.
plan your patches accordingly.
Yes. Yes. Plan your patches accordingly.
And
And
finally,
then also the cold
this one
fusion.
is just this is just for lulz. Yes, if you're an info security person who's been around the block for the last 20 years, like Rob and I, you will see these pop up every once in a while and think, Cold Fusion, what? Is that still a thing? And then, yes, the answer is yes. And there is Cold Fusion, like new versions. It's
Yep.
maintained by Adobe.
Yeah. No, it's cool.
People, for some reason, are still writing applications and supporting applications in Cold
Hmm.
Fusion. So, like, if you're like us and you're crotchety and old security people and you thought you didn't have to think about Cold Fusion anymore, like about once or twice a year, there's still a good Cold Fusion bug that you got to deal with.
Yep.
So that's it.
Yes. And we also we do yell at clouds a lot, but
We
in
do.
both
We
the
do yell at
so okay.
literal clouds. Next
Yes.
Wednesday. Yeah,
Yes.
so slight update to this. I'm going to be on this one now as well. So next Wednesday, HD, Rick Turner from Omdia. I'm going to try to say that right, that weird name right. HD and Rick and I are going to be talking about similar things that we talked about here at the top of the show of state of vulnerability management. It'll be some history lessons. We're all dinosaurs, so it should be fun. And we'll talk about like in the old days we did this, and now we did that,
Hmm.
and kind of sucked, and so we're doing it this way now. And and so really going over just like why vulnerability management kind of as a practice is kind of broken and what we're doing to fix it. So it should be
Yep.
fun. Should be a good conversation. You know, please join in, sign up for this. It'll be a blast.
Yep. And then also,
Also, this guy, that's me. So I
that's
am on
you.
Stormwatch every Tuesday forever, ever, ever, ever for the rest of my life. I'm going to be on Stormwatch. So that is Storm. It's in the morning for me. It's in the early afternoon, I think, for East Coast people and
Hmm.
European people and all that. It's a great gang of infosec nerds who do hot takes and talk about gossip. We also talk about real stuff. You know, we focus in on like basically news of the day. I imagine I know what we're going to be talking about next week. Um, we will know more about the whole CVE situation next week. I'm actually going to a board meeting like right after this. I'm on the CVE board, as I mentioned. So that'll probably create another wrinkle of what's going on there. Anyway, if you want to catch up, catch me next Tuesday.
Okay. And so
Oh
thank you
yeah,
for joining us. And
Rob, no, 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 no,
as,
no.
yes,
Not
as
thank
for
you for joining
leaving,
us. We got to do 45 seconds. Tell me your funny SMBV1 story. It came up
the
in
funny
chat.
SMB story. So SMBV1 was deprecated by Microsoft and was in fact turned off by one of the patches. I can't remember which, one of the updates, right? It
Mhm.
was turned off, but it was set up where if it saw an SMBV1 connection within the past, 30 days or something, it would not disable it, right? Because it wanted to, not
Not interrupt
disconnect your
service.
existing
Right.
stuff. Right, exactly. And so what was funny is the compliance checks to see if it was responding to SMBV1 were SMBV1 connections. So they would they would connect, it would reset the timer, and so it would never. So the whole mitigation was like anyway. So
Yeah,
that was fun. Not it's
that
yeah,
is
not a
pretty fun.
super exciting story, but yeah, that was fun. So anyway, yeah, poor Todd. He's heard all my stories like a million times. So anyway, all right. Thank you everyone for joining us. Definitely
Right.
go
Yes.
check out the
Real
risk
thank you.
dashboard. It is super awesome. Check out the exposure management capabilities of runZero. It is truly, truly one of my favorite things I've ever worked on. And I've worked on a lot of stuff, and I really, really love it. I really do. So go check
Yeah.
it out and definitely reach out to us. And yeah, we'll see you on May 21st for the next one. So
Yep.
bye, everybody.
You're on.